The night my son had a persistent high fever, I heard Zhou Heng flirting with his secretary by Huan in Spanish. Zhou Heng's lips curved slightly. Song Yan has had a child. She's not as tight as you. Don't worry, she's taking care of the feverish Qiao Qiao and has no time to notice me. Bai Huan's coquettish voice came from the speakerphone. Where does Mr. Zhou want me to wait for you? Zhou Heng glanced at me. The usual hotel. I'll make sure to satisfy you tonight. I held my son, my fingertips trembling from heartbreak. Zhou Heng didn't know that I minored in Spanish in college. I understood everything he said to his secretary tonight. Zhou Heng put on his coat and turned to leave. I touched my son's burning red cheek and anxiously looked at him. Heng, could you take Qiao Qiao and me to the hospital first? Zhou Heng frowned. There's an urgent matter at the company. It can't be delayed. An urgent matter? Urgent to get to bed with Bai Huan. I held back again and again. Qiao Qiao's fever is so severe that he could have a convulsion at any moment. What urgent matter could possibly be more important than our son's life? Before I could finish speaking, he had already slammed the door and left. Looking at my son, who was burning up and unconscious, I hesitated for a long time before calling Zhou Heng's brother. Zhou Xiang, Qiao Qiao's fever is not subsiding, and Heng said there's an urgent matter at his company tonight. Can you take us to the hospital? A steady male voice came from the other end. Okay, I'll be there soon. I hung up, my eyes brimming with tears. I was originally the daughter of the Song family and grew up with the two brothers of the Zhou family, the richest family in City A. Both of them had deep feelings for me. Zhou Heng was lively and playful, while Zhou Xiang was calm and reserved. In my youth, I was fascinated by Zhou Heng's sweet words and recklessly went on a trip to an island with him. Lately, I've often wondered, if I hadn't drunk the spiked red wine he gave me back then, would my life be completely different now? In less than 20 minutes, Zhou Xiang arrived. Bentley's headlights cut through the dense night, and he drove steadily. The familiar scent of Zhou Xiang's cologne filled my nostrils, a fragrance that was silent yet assertive. When Qiao Qiao's fever subsided after the 4 in the private ward, I finally felt relieved and went to the corridor, looking at Zhou Xiang gratefully. Thank you. I'm lucky you were here tonight. He replied calmly, it's what I should do to take care of my own nephew. I've sent a message to my brother. He'll come to pick you both up later. In the dim light, his cold, handsome features took on a touch of gentleness. Suddenly, my eyes turned slightly red. Why are you crying? Zhou Xiang raised his hand to wipe away my tears, then, as if realizing something, abruptly withdrew his hand. I shook my head while covering my face. A mocking laugh suddenly came from behind, and Zhou Heng strode towards us. Song Yan, Qiao Qiao's fever has subsided, yet instead of taking your son home to recuperate, you're still messing around with my brother in the corridor. What is it? Are you tired of the younger brother and now want to play with the older one? My face turned deathly pale. Zhou Xiang frowned deeply. Xiao Heng, what nonsense are you talking? Qiao Qiao had a fever so high he fainted, and instead of taking your son to the hospital, you rushed off to the office. What could be more important than your child? Bai Huan followed behind Zhou Heng, her face still flushed with traces of lingering affection. A few days ago, President Zhou was negotiating a big deal with a Spanish client, and he's been busy signing the contract. Isn't all of Zhou's hard work meant to provide a better life for Qiao Qiao and his wife? No one paid any attention to her. Zhou Heng pulled me into his arms and looked at Zhou Xiang with a defiant expression. Brother, thanks for tonight. I'm taking my wife and son home now. In the future, if there's nothing important, you shouldn't meet Song Yan alone. Avoid suspicion. You understand those words, right? I broke free from him with my eyes red. Zhou Heng. The doctor said if we'd been any later bringing Qiao Qiao, she would have suffered brain damage. Can you stop throwing dirt on me and your brother? Bai Huan blinked and chuckled. Zhou Heng suddenly glared at her. What are you laughing at? Go home quick, and don't be late for work tomorrow morning, or your full attendance bonus will be deducted. Bai Huan laughed charmingly and flirtatiously. Yes, yes, yes. See you in the morning, President Zhou. As she passed by me, I caught a strong scent of rose perfume on her, and my expression instantly changed. When I was 2 months pregnant, I had smelled this scent on Zhou Heng's shirt. Perhaps a woman's sixth sense is too keen. At that time, I felt Zhou Heng had another woman outside. However, Zhou Heng was exceptionally attentive to me then. He would always inform me of any social gatherings beforehand, never stayed out all night, frequently showered me with expensive gifts, and would turn off his phone during vacations to focus solely on me. He even hired a specialist to provide prenatal education for the baby in my belly. So aside from the scent, I couldn't find any evidence of Zhou Heng's affair. Looking back now, Zhou Heng perfected the art of reverse checking. He concealed everything thoroughly. If it hadn't been for tonight when he was flirting with Bai Huan in Spanish, I would have continued to be kept in the dark, constantly reflecting on whether I had done something wrong, or whether my postpartum recovery wasn't good enough to give him ultimate pleasure at night, which made him so unpredictable. After returning home, I watched Xiao Qiao's cute sleeping face and tears couldn't stop falling. Xiao Qiao is only 3 years old this year. I don't want him to live in a divorced family at such a young age, and I don't want his childhood to be missing a father's companionship. I'm really afraid that when he grows up he'll say something like, "I don't need a lot of money, I just want a lot of love." In wealthy families, pearls and gold may be as common as dirt and iron, yet love and companionship are especially precious. So, even though I know Zhou Heng has betrayed me and had an affair with that young and beautiful secretary Bai Huan, I have not filed for divorce. However, I didn't expect that my forbearance would not bring back Zhou Heng's conscience, but instead invited Bai Huan's provocation. On Sunday evening, Zhou Heng actually asked Bai Huan to move into the villa. This is the marital home where he and I lived. He once stood smiling in front of the villa's entrance, swearing to love only me for this life and the next. But now, for another woman, he has forgotten all of those vows. As he helped Bai Huan carry her suitcase into the guest room, he said to the maid, "Aunt Sue, make a few Sichuan dishes tonight. My secretary loves spicy food." I stood coldly on the second floor, watching them. Xiao Qiao just recovered from his illness. He can't eat spicy food. A hint of guilt flashed in Zhou Heng's eyes. "Oh, right. My son had a fever recently. Aunt Sue, please make some seafood porridge as well." Perhaps he also knew this was inappropriate, as he came to my bedroom that night to explain, "Song Yan, listen to me. The reason I let Bai Huan stay in our house is because this Spanish deal is urgent. It's not unprecedented for a personal secretary to temporarily stay at the CEO's home. Please understand, it's all for work." I gave a faint smile. I understand. Work comes first." Seeing that I didn't argue or make a fuss, Zhou Heng was satisfied and kissed my forehead lightly. Yan, you're so good. Once I'm done with this busy period, I'll take you and Xiao Qiao to Lushan Reservoir for a few days." I watched his back and pulled out a tissue to wipe the spot where he had kissed. The kiss of an unfaithful person is truly filthy. Early the next morning, Bai Huan was busy in the kitchen wearing a tight nightdress, her slender waist and curvy hips outlined enticingly. A moment later, she brought milk and sandwiches to the dining table. Zhou Heng's gaze lingered on Bai Huan as he took a bite of the sandwich. "It's really good. The cheese is melted just right." I looked at the sandwich, feeling no appetite. "Xiao Qiao, why don't you try Aunt Bai's cooking?" Bai Huan said with a smiling face, pointing to the sandwich in front of Xiao Qiao. Just as I was about to stop him, Xiao Qiao had already grabbed the sandwich and taken a big bite, suddenly coughing violently, his cheeks turning bright red. "Baby, what's wrong?" I hurriedly picked up Xiao Qiao, patting his back to help him catch his breath. His coughing became increasingly severe. I grabbed the sandwich he had eaten and found that a large amount of peanut butter was spread inside. I couldn't help but scream, "Call 911 immediately. Xiao Qiao is allergic to peanuts. He can't consume anything related to peanuts. If he does, he'll swell up." Standing in front of the emergency room, Zhou Heng had a gloomy expression. Bai Huan's face lost its color, and her eyes reddened. She softly said, "Sister-in-law, I really didn't know Xiao Qiao was allergic to peanuts." I sighed. From now on, let Aunt Sue handle the cooking. Tears streaked down Bai Huan's face as she cried, "It's all my fault. Sister-in-law must be mad at me. Mr. Zhou, I'd better move back to my apartment." Zhou Heng frowned deeply. "Why move? You didn't intentionally try to harm Xiao Qiao today. Stay here without worry." I looked at him blankly. 2 weeks after the sandwich incident, Zhou Heng suddenly called me into his study. Bai Huan was wiping her tears pitifully. Zhou Heng looked at me unhappily. "Song Yan, can you stop making things difficult for Bai Huan?" I laughed out of anger. When did I ever make things difficult for her? Zhou Heng knocked on the table. "The guest room Bai Huan is staying in was cleaned by you and Aunt Lu, right?" I nodded. His eyes were full of anger. "The window in Bai Huan's guest room can never be closed properly, giving her headaches. She loves spicy food, and when I'm not home, you always have Aunt Sue make it so bland that she can't get used to it, and she's lost weight. Also, can't you stop Xiao Qiao from bothering her so much? Don't let it happen again that she ends up eating the wrong thing and rushing to the emergency room like last time." Yet, it was Bai Huan who specifically asked for a well-ventilated guest room. Yet, I told Aunt Sue to prepare 2 flavor options for every meal. Yet, Bai Huan often wants to play with Xiao Xiao, and I'm afraid she might accidentally hurt Xiao Xiao, so I don't let them get close. And now, she's turning the tables on me. I silently watched Zhou Heng without a single word in my defense. After all, no matter what injustice Bai Huan suffered, Zhou Heng was always willing to stand up for her. No matter what mistake she made, Zhou Heng was eager to find excuses for her. I looked dejected, and Bai Huan suddenly looked at me timidly. "Sister-in-law, I want to talk to you alone." The study door was shut tightly, and Bai Huan sat on the desk with seductive eyes. "Song Yan, let's be frank, I'm pregnant with Zhou Heng's child." I remained calm. "What do you want?" Bai Huan smiled alluringly. "I want the position of the mistress of the house. I want my child to be an only child, with no one to compete for the family assets. I hope Zhou Heng will no longer hide me behind the facade of a secretary. Song Yan, are you willing to give him to me?" So it was her all along, stirring up trouble from behind the scenes. For the sake of wealth and status, she twisted facts, played tricks to gain sympathy, and even attempted to use peanut butter to threaten my child's life. I looked at her determined smile, feeling only irony and pity. Men love the thrill of stealing most. Under the pressure of a wife, having an affair with a lover is a strong stimulus for a man. If the wife decides to let go, the man will soon lose interest, and then, even a passionate lover like a rose will become nothing more than a dull splotch of mosquito blood. That night, I prepared 2 copies of the divorce agreement and slipped one into the documents Zhou Heng was supposed to sign the next day. Early the next morning, I boarded a flight with Xiao Xiao back to City A, to my mother's home. I smiled at Zhou Heng and Bai Huan as I left. By the time he discovers the signed divorce agreement, I should have already arrived at City A's airport. "Yan Yan, why didn't you tell me you and Xiao Xiao were coming back? I could have asked Aunt Ning to prepare a table of your favorite dishes." My mother looked at Xiao Xiao and me with joyful surprise. Nanny Wang took Xiao Xiao back to the bedroom. I sat down beside my mother, and tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. "Mom, I've divorced Zhou Heng." My mother's expression changed slightly. "He betrayed you, didn't he? Your father and I never approved of Zhou Heng. Back then, when you insisted on going to the island with him alone, I tried to talk you out of it for so long, but you wouldn't listen and even secretly took your documents to leave. Sai, we had wanted you to marry his brother, Zhou Xiang, but then Xiao Xiao came along." I sniffled and interrupted her. "If it weren't for Xiao Xiao, I would have cut ties with him long ago." My mother sighed and lovingly patted my head. "He and his secretary." I choked on my words, unable to continue. "Yan Yan, men who are greedy for novelty will never have a good end," my mother sneered. At 10 in the evening, I lay in a daze in my childhood bedroom. During my youth with Zhou Xiang and Zhou Heng, Zhou Xiang always had a way with words that made people happy, while Zhou Heng was like a gentle and silent shadow. At that time, I was too young, always distracted by Zhou Heng's vows of eternal love and sweet nothings, forgetting to notice the person who was always quietly getting things done. I remember one evening in a city, when heavy snow fell, and I played chess with the 2 brothers at the Zhou house until late at night. Zhou Heng, yawning as he looked at the swirling snowflakes outside the window, said, "It's snowing heavily today. It's so cold outside. Yan Yan, since our villas are close, why don't you tighten your scarf and head back home by yourself?" Before I could respond, Zhou Xiang silently stood up, donned his coat, and prepared to brave the snow to escort me home. The dim streetlights were shrouded by the wind and snow, becoming increasingly blurred. Zhou Xiang stood under the light watching me, his eyes filled with endless care and gentleness. Panicking slightly in my heart, I instinctively avoided Zhou Xiang's gaze and hurriedly rushed to the Song family's door in quick strides. I thought again of the time spent vacationing on the island with Zhou Heng. Unknowingly, I drank the glass of wine that Zhou Heng handed me, which was spiked, and fell drunk into his arms for a night of passion. Afterward, he apologized to me with a pitiful look. "Yan Yan, I really love you too much." I resorted to this because I wanted to get ahead. "I know my brother has feelings for you too, and I was so afraid he would take you away from me." When I was diagnosed by the doctor as being 1 month pregnant, Zhou Heng touched my lower abdomen with a look of joy. The efforts of that night were not in vain. "Now that you are having my child, I can rightfully marry you." I lowered my gaze and hesitated for a long time, not telling him about my application to study oil painting abroad. The next day, I quietly canceled that application. After all, the women around me at that time, like my aunts and sisters, all sacrificed themselves for love and family. I thought my sacrifice was also the right thing to do. Later, when I married Zhou Heng with our 1-month-old child in my belly, everyone laughed and applauded in congratulations, except Zhou Xiang, who stood beneath the stage looking at me gravely. After that, Zhou Xiang never got involved with any other woman again. He immersed himself in his archaeological work and skillfully repaired many precious and rare artifacts. I took a deep breath and raised my hand to cover my face. Perhaps, did I love the wrong person from the start? When I woke up again, I found that Zhou Heng had called me 26 times. What was he so anxious about? I rubbed my temples and dialed back. Yes? Zhou Heng answered quickly, his voice hoarse. Song Yan, are you going to divorce me? I replied indifferently. You should have signed it by now, right? It's a done deal. I wish you and Secretary Bai the best in securing that big Spanish project soon. Zhou Heng's tone was somewhat irritable. Yes, I signed it, but there are so many documents I have to sign each time. How do I have the energy to look at each one? Let me tell you, Song Yan, you are my wife, and Zhou Qiao is my son. None of you should think about leaving me. Where are you right now? I will come and take you home. I clenched my phone. We are already divorced, please do not bother me in the future. If you miss Qiao, you can occasionally come to the Song family in City A to see the child. After saying this, I hung up the phone. Mom, I want to eat Aunt Sue's sea urchin lobster egg custard. Qiao ran in from outside the door. I kissed his little face. Good boy Qiao at Grandma's house you can also have sea urchin lobster egg custard. Aunt Ning's cooking skills are even better than Aunt Sue's. I had only spent 7 carefree days at my parents' home when an uninvited guest arrived at the Song family. Mom, can you help me persuade Yan Yan? The divorce agreement was slipped into my documents by her trick, and I signed it without reading the content. Yan Yan is my wife. I can understand her throwing a tantrum and going back to her parents' house, but divorce is not child's play. I haven't eaten well or slept for days, and my work has suffered. Zhou Heng sighed endlessly in the living room. His mother no longer had her usual gentle smile. Xiao Heng, both you and Xiao Xiang grew up before my eyes. Why do you seem more and more unfamiliar to me as you've grown up? You say our Yan Yan is upset with you, but why do you think she's upset? You should know better than anyone else, right? Zhou Heng stubbornly insisted. Mom, Secretary Bai is close to me, but it's all for work. I really didn't want to hear his glib defense, so I walked down from the second floor and looked at him. Zhou Heng, that day Bai Huan told me she was pregnant with your child. She doesn't want her child to have siblings competing for the family inheritance, so she deliberately gave Qiao a sandwich spread with peanut butter, intending to harm Qiao. Zhou Heng shook his head in disbelief. How is that possible? Huan said she loves children the most. How could she deliberately harm a child? She said she wants to have at least 3 herself. He suddenly realized what he had just said and fell silent immediately. At least 3? Bai Huan really is willing to sacrifice herself for Zhou Heng. I remember when I was in labor with Qiao, it was a difficult birth. I was in pain for a whole day and night, and even suffered a tear. After coming out of the delivery room, I tearfully declared that I would never go through it again. At that moment, Zhou Heng's smile faded slightly, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile and said, although I've always hoped for more children and more blessings, I'll listen to you, Yan Yan. Having an only child is also great. Thinking back now, Zhou Heng was dissatisfied with me very early on. He just hid it well all along and resolved his desire for many children and abundant blessings by having children with other women. I chuckled lightly. Bai Huan suits you well, Zhou Heng. Since you've chosen to betray our marriage, why come to me for this tasteless old flame? He pressed his lips together and firmly pulled me by the hand towards the study. I want to talk to you alone. My mother stood up with a worried expression on her face. I waved her off and walked into the study with Zhou Heng. After closing the door, Zhou Heng looked at me with reddened eyes and said, I admit, I was indeed a bit dissatisfied with you before, but I still love you. I met his gaze. And suddenly spoke in Spanish. Song Yan has given birth. She can't compare to you. Zhou Heng's eyes widened in shock. You know Spanish? I sighed softly. That's not important. You've said such hurtful things. Now I understand what place I hold in your heart. He stared at me nervously. Yan Yan, listen. Bai Huan is just an ordinary little secretary. Once she has the baby, I'll let you raise it. Wouldn't you enjoy being a mother without the pain? Isn't it just money she wants? I'll give her 5 million to make her leave. Although I have some entanglements with Bai Huan, my heart is still with you. Women like Bai Huan are just motels, but you are my true home. In the end, I will come back to you. How can men of our class not have affairs? Can't you learn from other wealthy wives, turn a blind eye to your husband, and muddle through life? I stared at Zhou Heng's face, and a wave of disappointment surged in my heart. He really is silver-tongued, articulate, and his ability to distort the truth has only increased since he was young. After cheating, he had the nerve to make demands of me. These incredibly ludicrous statements could only be uttered by someone like him. Xiao Qiao doesn't need other siblings, and I don't need a man who cheats. I will not turn a blind eye to a future husband like those muddle-headed wives. My tone was very resolute. Seeing my determination, Zhou Heng's face instantly turned ashen. Song Yan, you can't leave me. I propped my chin on my hand and looked at him. You've already signed the divorce agreement. He suddenly fell to his knees in front of me, clutching the hem of my skirt with both hands. Yan, you can't be so heartless. Without a biological father, Xiao Qiao's childhood will surely be bleak. I leaned down and pried his fingers open one by one, freeing the hem of my skirt. You are the one who heartlessly betrayed our marriage first. Next time I get married, I'll make sure to see things clearly and never find someone as duplicitous and full of empty words for Xiao Qiao's father. Zhou Heng sat dejectedly on the ground. At this moment, there was not a trace of the domineering aura of a business tycoon about him. His face was full of regret, as if he had made some firm decision. I really can't lose you. I've decided. As soon as I return to City C tonight, I'll tell Bai Huan to have the child aborted and resign. From now on, I'll focus on us and raising Xiao Qiao well. I'll never act foolishly again. I'm begging you, please give me another chance, okay? I shook my head silently and turned to leave. Zhou Heng tightly held my calf. Actually, these days, I've really been busy with work most of the time. My dad's company, which he passed to me, has managed to land 3 big contracts in a row. With New Year approaching, if this Spanish deal doesn't come through, we won't even be able to give out year-end bonuses to the employees and may Ave to declare bankruptcy next year. What does that have to do with me? We're already divorced. I shook off his hand and walked out without looking back. It's sad to think about. I endured so much just to give Xiao Qiao a complete family. But Zhou Heng didn't invest much attention in Xiao Qiao. His heart was too crowded. The company, brothers, lovers, friends, fishing buddies. A person's energy is limited. The more he spends on outsiders, the less he has left for his wife and son. On the contrary, Zhou Heng's brother, Zhou Xiang, has always been exceptionally considerate towards me and Xiao Qiao. Zhou Heng couldn't even name Xiao Qiao's favorite cartoon character or color, but Zhou Xiang could, without missing a beat. Xiao Qiao isn't very close to Zhou Heng, who's always busy outside. Looking back now, this seems to be a good thing. Xiao Qiao doesn't have such a strong sense of need for Zhou Heng, so even if I remarry after divorcing, Xiao Qiao wouldn't be too heartbroken. The news of my divorce from Zhou Heng quickly reached Zhou Xiang's ears. One summer afternoon, while Xiao Qiao was napping in the children's room on the second floor of the villa, I quietly went downstairs and picked up my long-unused brushes and paints to start painting. Since I married Zhou Heng, I hadn't done anything I liked for a long time. After giving birth to Xiao Qiao, I took care of the child with the nanny, occasionally helping with cooking and housework, leaving almost no free time to paint properly. Although Zhou Heng is the youngest son of Zhou, the richest man, he hasn't received his father's favoritism or attention. Even the company he was given is a failing sunset industry. If he doesn't work hard, bankruptcy is what awaits him. His cash flow is very tight, and I've supplemented him with quite a bit of money for my family. In order to cut costs and increase efficiency, he made our life together after marriage somewhat indescribably tight. Perhaps my pen follows my emotions, as the heroine in my painting appears to have a sorrowful face. Your painting is really beautiful. Zhou Xiang's voice suddenly came from behind me. My hand shook, and the paintbrush fell to the ground. I slowly turned around. Zhou Xiang, why are you here? Zhou Xiang crouched down to pick up the paintbrush for me and handed it back to me. Uncle Song said he found a porcelain statue in the garden of the old house outside the city yesterday, and it looks like a historical relic. He asked me to come over to take a look. His fingertip, as if unintentionally, brushed across my soft palm. My palm tingled, and I trembled slightly, almost unable to hold the paintbrush tightly. I'll go upstairs first to talk to your father about the porcelain statue. We'll see each other later. He gave me a slight smile and turned to go upstairs. A faint scent of cologne wafted over my face. Watching his handsome back, I suddenly eased my legs together, my cheeks burning. Realizing that my reaction was off, I rushed into the bathroom and took a cold shower. Watching the water droplets slide down my fair skin, I sighed deeply and covered my face. No. Why is this happening? Why do I have such a strong physical affection for my ex-husband's brother? Once I calmed down, the sky was already ablaze with stunning sunset hues. Zhou Xiang stood silently appreciating the painting I hadn't finished. It's getting late. How about we continue chatting next time? You should head home first. For some reason, I found it hard to meet his gaze. He nodded. All right, then let's meet at Blue Night Cafe on Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. A mess of emotions, I agreed absent-mindedly. In less than 3 hours, I had 15 missed calls from Zhou Heng. I glanced at them and cleared them all with a single button. In my youth, I was very fond of Zhou Heng. Even after he drugged and plotted to have me with child, I willingly concealed everything for him and happily married him. But now that I'm divorced and free, I can't deny that I have feelings for Zhou Xiang. Moreover, besides these feelings, I harbor an unspeakable desire for him. Days you look forward to always pass quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was Wednesday. I wore a low-key light purple long dress, loosely pinned up my soft long hair, applied light makeup, and went to the appointment. You look much better than before, Zhou Xiang said, setting down his coffee cup. Maybe it's because I'm more relaxed after the divorce and I feel more energetic, I replied with a smile. Zhou Xiang's gaze swept over my ring finger. There once was a wedding ring worn there for a long time. Now, the ring is gone, but a hard-to-fade red mark remains. A bad marriage is like a shackle and also like an indelible scar. How ugly. I instinctively retracted my hand. He looked back at my face. Even though you and Xiaoheng are divorced, the bond we three share from growing up together can't be denied. I wanted to persuade you not to endure everything just because of Qiao Qiao. After all, a good stepfather might provide a happier childhood than a lousy biological father. Even though he is Zhou Heng's brother, he doesn't show favoritism and instead stands by my side, comforting me. A warm feeling suddenly surged in my heart. Try this cherry cake, it's a new product from the shop. I remember you liked cherries since you were little. There was one year when Uncle Song took the three of us to the cherry orchard to pick cherries. He pushed a plate of cherry cake towards me. I forked a piece into my mouth. It really is delicious. Oh, you still remember those days? I was really greedy back then, picking cherries and immediately stuffing them into my mouth. Last month, I arranged a partnership with the cherry orchard in the western suburbs. From now on, whenever cherry season arrives, they will send cherries to the Song family. You can eat as much as you like. He looked at me with gentle eyes. The cherry cake in my mouth suddenly became unbearably bitter. I remembered that after marrying Zhou Heng, there was a time when he had financial difficulties, and I, having just finished my confinement period, really wanted to eat cherries. Upon learning this, my mother specially bought me 4 boxes of expensive large cherries. Just as I was enthusiastically unpacking the cherries, Zhou Heng erupted in fury. He pointed at my nose and yelled, "You know my company is struggling with cash flow, so why are you spending money on these superficial fruits? Aren't the fruits Aunt Sue buys from the market enough for you?" I was frozen in place at the time and immediately felt guilty, even beginning to self-reflect. I was truly lacking in empathy, enjoying life with my family's money while my husband was struggling. Looking back now, I realized that Zhou Heng used me as a punching bag. I was really foolish back then, suffering so much for a man like that. My eyes dimmed slightly in thought. Cherries in cherry season are big and sweet. Watching Aunt Ning receive the 3rd box of cherries from the delivery man, my mother poked my forehead with her fingertip. Even though Zhou Heng is a jerk, his brother is a good kid. You must remember to reciprocate. I nodded while holding my head. Zhou Xiang was really interested in my paintings, so after some thought, I arranged to have a framed painting delivered to him. After he received the painting, he returned the favor once again. Always mindful of my mother's teachings, I dared not slack off. Through these exchanges, we started to have more interactions. Another spring came, and Zhou Xiang sent a new gift, 2 cruise tickets. Having spent time with him these days, I knew he loved me deeply, and he could see that I had intentions towards him. I think these cruise tickets were his way of hinting at his feelings. That night, he and I boarded the luxurious cruise ship. A tuxedo-clad attendant led us to a large suite with an open-air balcony. My gaze swept over the room's solitary large round bed, and a slight smile appeared at the corner of my lips. After downing a bottle of white wine, my ears and cheeks flushed. However, Zhou Xiang sat upright in the high-backed chair like a gentleman. "Xiaoyan, are you okay?" I looked at his chest beneath his shirt and, fueled by intoxication, threw myself at him. After a night of passion, I realized Zhou Xiang was much better than Zhou Heng. It turned out that it wasn't my postpartum recovery that was lacking, but Zhou Heng's resources were simply inadequate. I remember falling into a dreamlike state in the early morning, amidst tears and pleas, my lips curving upward and never coming down. Zhou Xiang was the first to make me understand the meaning of ultimate bliss. While Zhou Xiang and I were ensconced in a secretive love affair, Zhou Heng's situation worsened. His company could no longer sustain itself, falling into the whirlpool of financial troubles. It was said that he was so distraught that he went mad at home. When Bai Huan, heavily pregnant, tried to calm him down, she was accidentally hit by him, causing severe bleeding. By the time she was taken to the hospital, the child could no longer be saved. After the miscarriage, Bai Huan finally faced reality. She returned to her hometown in a weakened state, and after recuperating for a few months, she took the money she had saved over the years and married a small business owner in the town who was divorced. I have always been curious as to why the wealthy Mr. Zhou was so cold and indifferent towards his second son. My mother told me a piece of gossip after attending a socialite gathering. It turns out that Zhou Heng is the illegitimate son of the wealthy Mr. Zhou. His mother was originally the personal secretary of Mr. Zhou, who had a fondness for beauties with slender waists. His mother happened to possess a willowy waist and walked with an alluring grace, earning the deep affection of Mr. Zhou, and was given a company and a large villa. However, his mother was not satisfied and repeatedly visited to provoke, with the intention of using the child to climb the social ladder. The wife of Zhou, the richest man, was so troubled by this that she directly executed a plan to keep the child and dispose of the mother by using tax issues to send her to prison. Zhou Heng did not have outstanding talents, and the richest man Zhou did not want to entrust him with significant responsibilities. In my youth, he used sweet words to make me happy and swore eternal love. He drugged my drink on the island, causing me to become pregnant with his child unwillingly, and I had no choice but to reluctantly marry him and become his wife. Did he do all this because he truly loved me? Or was he deceiving me all along, with the sole intention of attaching himself to my status? I felt a bit dazed. Perhaps his fondness for his secretary Bai Huan was, in some sense, an attempt to make up for his biological mother. But none of this has anything to do with me anymore. In late autumn, Zhou Xiang and I got married. The guests at the wedding banquet were either tycoons or elites. The lives of wealthy people are always incredibly exciting, so my divorce from the brother and remarriage to the other brother didn't cause any stir. Everyone was blessing us for a harmonious union. Zhou Xiang put the ring on my finger. I looked down, and the deep red mark on my ring finger was covered by a larger, more expensive diamond ring that fit perfectly. This was a diamond ring Zhou Xiang had custom-made for my hand by the best jewelry master. Whether in thoughtfulness or money, he was willing to give them all for me. Xiao Qiao really likes Zhou Xiang and quickly accept. Do the transition from uncle to dad, calling out dad, dad, dad all day long. Zhou Xiang, however, wasn't annoyed at all. Instead, he was very pleased, always responsive to Xiao Qiao in everything and often taking him to the park to play. Xiao Qiao grew increasingly attached to him. I can tell his affection for Xiao Qiao is genuine. On New Year's Day, the whole family gathered for a meal. Halfway through, I suddenly felt my stomach churning. I immediately covered my mouth and rushed to the bathroom, turning pale from vomiting. I pulled out a tissue to wipe my mouth and looked at myself in the mirror with a wry smile. This uncomfortable feeling was all too familiar. When I was pregnant with Xiao Qiao, I had thrown up like this. I took a pregnancy test from under the drawer. Looking at the clear 2 lines, I fell into deep thought. When did I conceive this child? I couldn't calculate it at all. After all, these days, I've been too indulgent with Zhou Xiang. Thinking about it, I covered my face with shame and annoyance. Xiaoyan, how are you? Once you're done vomiting, come out quickly. I'll drive you to the hospital. Zhou Xiang's steady voice was laced with panic for the first time. I opened the door and hid the hand holding the pregnancy test behind my back. I'm fine, but I have something big to tell you. Zhou Xiang had a very serious expression. Go ahead, no matter what happens, I'll face it with you. I reached out my hand to show him the 2 lines. I'm pregnant. Zhou Xiang was stunned. A moment later, his eyes gradually lit up with uncontrollable joy. That's wonderful. I'm going to be a dad again. Xiao Qiao told me some time ago that he felt lonely. Now he's going to have a little brother or sister to keep him company. I shyly nestled into his arms. 10 months later, I gave birth to a lovely daughter. Zhou Xiang was grinning from ear to ear. Our daughter's eyes and chin look like yours. Her forehead and nose look like mine. This kid sure knows how to grow. She's inherited both our best features. I hummed softly. Oh, so it seems a Xiang thinks my forehead and nose aren't good-looking. He immediately moved closer to me. Of course not. My wife is the most beautiful. You mustn't get angry. Getting angry during confinement isn't good for your health.